friends. Welcome back to the Deadology Podcast. From Pencil Hill Studio, New Paltz, New York, I'm your host, Howard Weiner. This here is Season 2, Episode 19 of the podcast, and today is May 17th, 2024. It's a beautiful Friday here in New Paltz, and for this episode of the podcast, we're going to go time travel back to 1977 for a famous show on this day, May 17th, in Alabama. And before we take a look at that show, 2 days earlier, they played another awesome show in St. Louis, so we're going to include that one as part of the podcast. Last week, we took a look at another Europe 72 show. May is such a great month, that Europe 72 tour. We looked at Rotterdam. We'd also recently taken a look at Bickershaw and Tivoli Gardens. So now we're going to make that big jump to 1977, another peak experience, another peak year in the Grateful Dead experience. Take your pick. 72, you had the long dark stars, the long playing in the bands. And in 1977, you got all the new great songs. You don't have those long dark stars anymore, but you got all the great new combos: Scarlet Fire, Estimated Eyes, Help on the Way, Slipknot Franklin's, and you got spectacular versions of Music Never Stop, Mississippi Half Step, Eyes of the World. So May 77 is definitely a peak year for the Grateful Dead, especially this month, May. So you have, the way I look at it, there's two unbelievable runs during this month. The first one, I believe, starts in New Haven on May 5th, followed by Boston Garden on the 7th. The most famous show in Dead history, Cornell, May 8th. And the awesome one that follows it, Buffalo, May 9th. So that's as good a shows as you could have back-to-back there. And then they come up with another great run in the middle of May, and this is what makes it such a standout month. The band was just so creative and so confident at this month. So you got the St. Louis show, followed by Alabama on the 17th, then 2 nights in the Fox Theater, 18th and 19th, and that 22nd show in the Hollywood Sportatorium. Just 5 unbelievable shows in a row. Confidence and creativity. That's what the Dead were oozing at this particular time in May. So let's jump into this St. Louis show, Joe Louis Arena. And I'm going to kind of skip ahead to some of the more important developments in the show because we got 2 shows, a lot to talk about here. So they open up that night. The only difference between 72 and 77 as far as personnel, Mickey Hart's in the band. Otherwise same personnel as May 72. We're opening up with a Bertha Good Lovin', gets St. Louis dancing right away, out of their seats. Roe Jimmy, Hot Minglewood, Tennessee Jed, and the show really starts to pick up at this point. You got a very cool Lazy Lightning supplication tucked into the middle of that set, followed by Jackarow. And this is the second performance of Jackarow. The first one was Chicago 2 nights earlier, and they would also play this in Alabama the following night. I don't think there's not many Jackarows in 77, but it's pretty cool that they played it 3 nights in a row. Just breaking it in, it would eventually be a key song in the Dead rotation. And Jackarow is followed by Passenger. This is one of 3 big firsts on this night in St. Louis. This is the first time the Grateful Dead played Passenger, and the Phil Lesh composition came off, sounding very good. But Passenger really blossomed the following year when they added a second instrumental to it, gave it a lot more punch, a lot more presence. So by 1979, with Passenger, you're looking at one of the powerhouse Grateful Dead tunes that clocks in at under 6 or 7 minutes. So it was a little powder keg of a song, Passenger, for a couple years until they stopped playing it. So it debuted on this night, May 15th in St. Louis. Then you get the Funicula tuning before Brown Eyed Women. And, I'm going through the set pretty quick here because the last song of this set is a monster. Perhaps, well, not, in my opinion, the greatest version of Dancin' in the Streets ever. A few episodes ago, we were looking at April 12th, 1970 from the Fillmore West when the Grateful Dead played with, they didn't play at the same time, but Miles Davis was on the bill opening for the Grateful Dead. That show has one of the unbelievable Dancing in the Streets, just incredible. This is the only one I think I actually might like it a little better. So they come out cooking on this version. And what an interesting thing, Donna really took a liking to Dancin' in the Streets, and she almost takes over the lead vocals from Bobby in a lot of these 1977 versions, as she does here in St. Louis. And she sounds, this is definitely one of her highlights of singing with the Grateful Dead on Dancing in the Streets. And the band is just absolutely cooking. Turbocharged, long instrumental. This one, that big instrumental, I think it's even a little hotter than the one from Cornell a week earlier, which is pretty famous. And I think a lot of people rate that as the best dancing. This one's definitely a little better up to that point. And then what puts it over the top is the way it ends. So they break off into that brilliant funky ending before they go back to sing-along. It's kind of like a Sly Stone influenced funk chord progression. It's amazing how they came up with this as compared to how the song sounded back in 1970, and the last time they played, I think, was New Year's Eve 71 before they brought it back in 76. Just such a great arrangement. How they came up with these arrangements, unbelievable. And then the band just sings and sings, and they're laughing and having a good time with the Dancing's final sing-along, and then it has this dramatic instrumental fanfare conclusion to it. Just incredible. And I've talked about it enough. Let's take a listen. We're going to take a short break. Everybody keep dancing. A huge conclusion there to that opening set, Dancing in the Streets. And St. Louis would keep on dancing in set 2 as we get another first combination to open up set 2. The Grateful Dead do their first ever estimated profit into Eyes of the World. They had lined the songs up next to each other, but estimated had always come to an ending. Well, they did it at least once. They might have done it another time. Boston Garden on May 7th, the songs were lined up right next to each other, but there was no segue. On this night, they did Estimated Eyes, and it worked pretty damn good, so it became a Grateful Dead staple forever, man. Estimated Profit, Eyes of the World, born in St. Louis, May 15th, 1977. So pretty cool opening up the set with Estimated, and they go into Eyes, which has the nice, typical, long 77 intro, Phil doing some excellent bass leads. And man, that first instrumental in this Eyes, the first between verse instrumental, so good. You know, the band takes off, Jerry's sailing, and then they do this, the band does this cool thing where they kind of do this galloping horse kind of chord progression in the middle where they're just digging the rhythm of Eyes of the World. And what it does, it sets up Garcia to take off on another solo, which will be hotter than the one he just played. And they do this on a couple versions. They do it in Colgate on November 4th. Englishtown has something like this. I love when they take that little rhythmic break in the middle of an instrumental, and then Garcia is able to take it in a different direction and make it even hotter. And after that chord progression thing in the middle, skimming stones, whatever you want to call it, Garcia just goes off and does this taunting, playful lick. It's and the crowd, of course, roars. Second solo, great. So this is one of the all-time best Estimated Eyes of the World. Pretty cool for a first version. But the thing which really kind of stands out on the St. Louis version is the last solo, which just is a shrill. But Garcia just goes off and takes it to a place Eyes of the World has never been before and never would go again. And that's really one of the trademarks of May 77. They did so many cool things that you never heard before and you would never hear again the way they played it. Man, they were so creative during this time period. And I guess part of the inspiration, they got a bunch of things going on. The Grateful Dead movie is going to come out pretty soon, the following month. They got Terrapin Station coming out. They've returned from their break from touring after 1976, and they're just full of this incredible confidence. So let's hear that outro solo to the Eyes of the World. There you go, the first estimated profit into Eyes of the World for the good people of St. Louis and Joe Louis Arena on that night. Following the Eyes outro, they go into drums, and then Samson and Delilah, which would be debuted on their upcoming album Terrapin Station. Rocking version as always, or as I like to say, they lay down the almighty 77 hammer, just killer rock and roll from the Grateful Dead, Samson and Delilah. And moving forward, they do Ship of Fools, kind of a little regather themselves for the big final rock off at the end. Jerry's voice, I think it's a little better the following night in Alabama. It's a touch hoarse, still very good, but just a touch hoarse on this night. That's what doing all these days in a row touring will do to one's voice. For the most part, May 77, he was in excellent vocal quality. This night, just a little bit of hoarseness to his voice. So after Ship of Fools, St. Louis is in for quite a thrill. St. Stephen. Now, obviously, these versions aren't as long as the one later in the year where they did complete versions. These were versions where they would generally go into other songs. I think in this month, once or twice, they completed St. Stephen in full. So this is a partial St. Stephen, still very hot. No miscues on it. And St. Stephen, after the thrill of St. Stephen, we get another the third debut on this night. Iko Iko. It all began in Joe Louis Arena. So it sounds like they're going into Not Fade Away after St. Stephen. It's got the exact same beat as Not Fade Away, but they break into a verse of Iko Iko, and it sounds terrific, man. So they tried out the Iko Iko verse, and this song is definitely a keeper. By the time they play it in Colgate on November 4th, it's a complete version, a complete version of Iko Iko, a song unto itself. But here they just do a verse, a well-sung verse, and then they transition into Not Fade Away. And man, this is a really hot Not Fade Away. Not as long as there's so many 15-minute versions from this year, 77, the last truly great year for Not Fade Away. This one's great, but it's probably only about 9-10 minutes. Weir decides Garcia's noodling away on it, and Bobby decides to go into Sugar Mag, and they rock out a good Sugar Mag to close out the set. This show is not the longest of the 77 shows. The one in Alabama would be much longer, but it's a hot Sugar Mag to close out, and just an awesome encore. They play Uncle John's Band. And the versions from this year, once again, it's almost like they could do no wrong on certain songs in 77, and Uncle John's Band is one of those songs. And just to sum up the way the band's feeling, how much fun they're having, after the Uncle John's Band encore, the crowd's out there going nuts. And Phil Lesh just says, "St. Louis, how sweet it is." And yes, it was. Phil, May 15th, 1977, St. Louis. And then they got an off day, board the buses, move the equipment, go all the way down south, cross the Mason-Dixon lines, don't stop until you reach Tuscaloosa, Alabama. The Grateful Dead bring their show to the University of Alabama on May 17th. And this, in a book I wrote, Grateful Dead, 1977, The Rise of Terrapin Nation, I rated the St. Louis show number 5 of the year. And I might put 1 or 2 ahead of it now, but definitely worthwhile of a 5th spot rating. And as far as the year goes, the Alabama show I had a number 2, and this is an epic classic show, no doubt about it. I really was taken back and enjoyed listening to this in preparation for the podcast. I heard it a number of times, and I was looking at DeadNet, what people had to say about this show. And there's a guy, Joe, I don't know, I would credit him more than Joe, but there was a guy, Joe, who wrote this paragraph. I thought it was cool because it kind of captures the excitement of this show and what it was like being there. He starts it off, a religious experience. I was there in Tuscaloosa that evening, and thankfully, a bit cosmic. I've been to hundreds of concerts and have lived a very full life. but I've not experienced anything like 5/17/77 before or since. I've never been a church person, though I've often wished those Sunday gatherings could offer me some spiritual food. However, I remember walking out of the venue that evening and telling my girlfriend that's what church should be like. And to this day, I wish it was. It was a true communion. The crowd and the band were solidly linked in ways that transcended eyes and ears. It was amazing. So glad I happened to be there. And I got to agree with that 100%. I listened to a soundboard audience, and that really grabbed me. The way the band was playing and responding to the crowd, and the crowd was going nuts. It was definitely a religious experience. The soundboard matrix mix is definitely worth listening to, just to get a feel for how excited. And that's dismay. I think the thing is, the band is, you could tell they're completely excited. And the audience, you could just hear it. Where in Europe 72, I'm sure the crowds out there are enjoying it, but the music was over their heads. I mean, that music was over everybody's heads. It was just like way ahead of its time. It's not like the type of thing during a 45-minute Dark Star you could jump up and be screaming the whole time. It was more of a listening experience. And, these May shows, man, there was just such energy. And the crowd was all over these songs. And even the new songs had that, just the communion with the crowd, so I think that guy did a pretty good job of capturing what it was like. So on this night, every song they're just ripping, man. Starts off with the Minglewood Blues, extremely hot. Like, they opened up a lot of shows this time with it, but I think this one has just like a little extra something. And then they go right into one of the killer songs of 1977. Mississippi, Half Step, Uptown Toodaloo. And there's definitely some better versions from 77, like the Boston Garden, but for the second spot, this is pretty incredible. And the first long solo in the middle is good, but it's this outro that's killer. The band sounds like they're trying to close it up, and Jerry's vetoing it. He's like, no way, man. I'm playing right through that. And they rip off a really hot last solo on this half step. So let's give that a listen. Mr. Jerry Garcia setting the tone early in Alabama. Awesome solo there. And this is a historic set as far as length. It clocks in at about 110 minutes, almost 2 hours. First set, 14 songs. It's like a Europe 72. Even in Europe 72, they didn't play many sets, first sets this long. So really, as far as it's an all-time first set, length record for first set almost. I don't have exact numbers, but it's got to be up there. Definitely the longest one of 1977. And they keep it geographical after going across the Rio Grande. They're in the West Texas town of El Paso, and the show started off in Texas, so you got a nice little geographical connection there. A fine version of Love Each Other in the fourth spot, and then a pair of jacks back-to-back, Jack Straw and Jack-A-Row. And I like this Jack Straw a lot. It's got very cool rhythmic playing to it, and Jack-A-Row is an excellent version. Third time they played it, 3 nights in a row. And this is the version that's on the Phil Zone release. So it's definitely an excellent choice for that. We got Looks Like Rain next. Tennessee Jed, which was also played in St. Louis the night before. There's definite excitement, just coming down south, so they're breaking out all the southern-related tunes. We get Big River later on in the set. Hot Tennessee Jed, and we got Passenger. Once again, they're breaking in the new tune, and at this point, Passenger is only 3 minutes and 36 seconds. The good versions in a couple of years would be over 6 minutes in length. Then after that, they're taking a nice, slow, hypnotic version of High Time. Cool version. Jerry singing is right on, and the set's rolling along, and there seems to be no end in sight. With the 11th song, they rock it out with a hot Big River. By the way, if you love Big River, the one from May 9th in Buffalo, I believe, is the best, and that's the only first set from this month I think that would compare to this one. It might even be better. May 9th, Buffalo has a great first set, and Alabama, May 17th, we're on to song 12. Donna does Sunrise, which she also did in Buffalo on May 9th, and it came at the same spot, the song before they go into the big set ender. And there's something about Sunrise, it fired up the band after they follow Sunrise, because whenever they play Sunrise, they play greatest ever versions after. In Buffalo, they did the hottest music never stopped you'll ever hear. And there's a show from the Shrine Auditorium, I believe it's January 11th. I think they played Sunrise before the hottest St. Stephen I've ever heard. And here they play Sunrise before ending the set with Scarlet Fire. And you figure maybe a Scarlet Fire to end the set won't be as hot or as long as one that opens up the second set. But anyone thinking that would be wrong, man, because this Scarlet Fire is nuts. The first solo, they're in the mood on this night. Great first solo. Donna does some scat singing, not quite as smooth as the one from Cornell, but still kind of funny and good. And Scarlet's cooking along, and the transition to the fire is seamless. It's like you don't even, all of a sudden you're in fire, man. It has like that hypnotic quality where you don't even notice that they're going into, all of a sudden they're into the beginning of fire. And the beginning of this Fire on the Mountain, which I'm going to play, is one of the most incredible pieces of music, man. Just the Grateful Dead in that rhythm, digging the rhythm. There's no song like Fire on the Mountain, and the way the Grateful Dead played it, they were just in touch with something unworldly. They just, even cover bands can't really capture what the Grateful Dead did with this song. So the thing that makes this version stand out, beautiful melodic opening line from Jerry, but then he steps on the Neutron filter, and just hits this whapping noise in perfect timing, just unlike anything I've ever heard in a Fire on the Mountain. And instead of trying to describe it, I'm going to play it. It's just one of those coolest things you're ever going to hear. And they never played it like this again. Just one of these beautiful little standout pieces from 1977, so memorable, and just a one-of-a-kind thing that only the Grateful Dead could do.
left, get out, get out of the door. Playing cold music on the ballroom floor.
Even on a soundboard tape, you can hear the crowd roaring as they as they experience that Fire in the Mountain, that awesome opening to the fire. And as the Dead roll through that first solo, the Jerry redirects the jam twice. So it's one of the longest between verse solos in the Fire in the Mountain from 1977. The Jerry's just, all over the place with it, different creative ideas. And I'd rate this one second behind the Cornell Scarlet Fire for 1977. There's so many in 70. So they first did Scarlet Fire in the Winterland March 18th, and the second version Philly April 22nd. That's a pretty awesome version. Very good Fire in the Mountain there. And it's just interesting to hear the way they're developing Scarlet and Fire and trying the different things. The last version in Chicago before this one on May 13th, there's almost no Scarlet outro. They go right into Fire, but the Fire has a great 5-minute opening solo. So that part of it's great. And then Lakeland, there's an awesome Scarlet Fire. So the way I think I'd rate the top ones from this month, we got Cornell. I put the Alabama one second. Probably Lakeland 3, and maybe New Haven 4. Very interesting month for the way they're developing Scarlet Fire and figuring out how to play it. I think it fell into a little malaise at the end of 77. The versions aren't as hot as May, but they picked it up again in 78, especially when they added the extra verse, which gave Garcia another opportunity to jam. So there it is, man. Almost 2 hours of music for Alabama in the first set. That was a concert by itself right there. But they don't shortchange the crowd in the second set. The second set's about an hour and a half, too, if you include the encore. So set 2 opens up with Samson, and they just come out. Once again, the confidence and the power, the almighty 77 hammer, they lay it down to start the set off. Samson and Delilah, ripping version. And another one of these cool one and off kind of things from this show. As they hit the end of Samson, they're doing the final sing-off, Tear This Old Building. And the band, knowing the band sings down, they just shoot right into Bertha, shot out of a cannon. It's incredible, man. It's so electric. And it really grabs you. It's so different from anything they've done before. And there's so many of these things this month. Like if you look ahead 2 days, you go to the Fox Theater, you got that playing, Uncle John's Wheel, China Doll playing that huge segment from May 19th, Fox Theater. And the way they started the Uncle John's band, they started from the ending of Uncle John's and then went back to the beginning. They just had the confidence to pull this stuff off, live in the moment, And I don't know if they talked about it before, but they're able to communicate in the moment and do these amazing things on the fly. And they would do something similar in the Hollywood Sportatorium at the next show. I believe it was like a Terrapin into Wharf Rat, Morning Dew, where they cut the Terrapin and made a transition. Such a memorable month for the Grateful Dead. So Samson, Bertha, and it goes into Good Lovin'. And just think, you got Deadheads there, and you got people, college students from Alabama who may know the Grateful Dead a little bit. What a great way to start the set off. Samson, Bertha, Good Lovin', just a dance band, a party band. Everybody having a good time, just, and the Dead just on fire, man. And then after that 3-song start, they play Brown Eyed Women. And this comes off like a love ballad because of just how energetic the first 3 songs were. But good version of Brown Eyed Women. And now it's time to show off their new songs from Terrapin Station. You got Estimated Profit. And even for fans of the band who never heard Estimated, it had to be so fetching to hear that great instrumental, Garcia and Mutron Heaven just wailing away, kind of like a Russian fiddler. Estimated Profit, obviously a very powerful song live. And then Terrapin Station. And man, what a good version this is. Garcia doubles down on the first solo. Terrapin Station, huge song. And by this time, they really had it down pat. Maybe the first couple of versions were a little quick. I think the tempo might have been a little quick, but you could really tell the band's loving this tune. They realize it's a major anthem, and they're really beginning to play it the way it should be played. And what would become a kind of regular handoff after the great Terrapin fanfare at the end, it goes into Playing in the Band. And this next segment, Playing in the Band, drums, Wharf Rat playing in the band, may not sound. There's no way it sounds as good as it is. I mean, it may not be overwhelming to hear that to end the show, you might think, but this really is an excellent. Every time I hear this playing drums, Wharf Rat playing, I'm blown away. It's just so good. So they jump into a nice little playing after all this energetic new songs. Fully took Alabama everywhere they would want to go. Gave the crowd everything they could ever want. Now they take them into the playing territory. And playing, when it dips into drums, this is actually an excellent drums, kind of like a drum solo you would expect at a rock concert. Mickey and Billy are just going off here. And as they come out of drums, they go straight into Wharf Rat. It's like a very trippy beginning into Wharf Rat. It's very unusual, this segment, but it's done so well. Jerry singing the Rat, beautiful. And they come to the end of Rat, and they noodle their way back into Playing in the Band. And the way they close out these playings in 77, they did it a few times. There's a very good version from the Palladium. Colgate, once again, November 4th, has a tremendous end playing loop. The Fox Theater on May 19th, they're going to get another great play and to end the show. And this one's as good as any and just ends a tremendous long night of music by the Grateful Dead. So let's hear them close out the May 17th Alabama show with Playing in the Band. By the way, if I haven't mentioned it yet, this is the Grateful Dead's first concert in Alabama. And the excitement between the band and the fans is mutual and palpable. You could definitely hear it in the playing. Just so much energy on this night. So after they finished the set with playing in the band, you think they might leave without an encore. They did that before after finishing a night with playing. They did that in the Fox Theater in a couple nights. I can't recall. I don't think they did an encore in Colgate after finishing with playing. Sometimes when they did these really long sets, they just playing in the band, thank you, good night kind of thing. But not on this night. Weir addresses the crowd, and I didn't write down exactly what he said, but he said something to the effect that if I'm sure you've heard enough magic already, but we're going to do an encore or anyway. And the crowd's going nuts, man. This is just one of those nights like the guy Joe, who I read his description of the religious experience. You definitely get the feel of the religious experience, especially at this point. Oh yeah, and they break into Sugar Magnolia for the encore. Incredible. After such a long show, it's not like a little throwaway encore. It's a big-time Sugar Magnolia, and it's hotter than the one in St. Louis. And I'm sure of that because I was listening to it the other night. I said, the Alabama Sugar Mag was so good. I had to hear it again, and I went to hear it last night. And I listened to it. I said, that's not as good as I thought. And then I realized I was listening to the St. Louis one. And then I heard the Alabama one. And this is definitely one of the better ones of the year. An all-time great version. They just sizzle. For an encore, for them to put that much energy into it after such a long night. Brilliant, man. Just a great night. May 17th, 1977, Alabama. As good as any show from the year. And that's the end of this edition, Season 2, Episode 19 of the Deadology Podcast. I'm your host, Howard Weiner. Thanks for listening. Subscribe to the podcast. I got a website, www.tangledupintunes. And next week is Bob Dylan's birthday. I think he's going to be 83. The guy's still out there touring, 83. So next week will be an episode dedicated to the greatest version of Grateful Dead's Bob Dylan covers. So I'm looking forward to that. I don't even know what I'm going to be picking out, but yeah, looking forward to picking that out and editing that show. A little tribute to Bob Dylan, Grateful Dead style. Once again, Howard Weiner here. Have a great week. Peace out.